Eric Lamarre, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me, Mahan.
Really excited. I love the book, The McKinsey Guide. Now, it's a guide to outcompeting in the age of digital and AI. Before we get to that, though, Eric, we'd love to know whereabouts you grew up and how your upbringing impacted the kind of person you've become.
Awesome. So I'm Canadian. I come from Quebec. My training is in engineering. I'm a civil engineer and oceanographic engineer. I studied actually ocean engineering and underwater acoustic in grad school at MIT. And this is where I got a lot into large volume data analysis, because that's what you do in acoustics. And so I guess my first initial foray in this field of data, and it certainly was not AI when I was doing this 30 years ago, it was brute force data analysis, and building out acoustic sensors and doing experiments in the ocean. And that was a fun part of my early career. And I got a little bit of a handle on analytics and the science behind. And after that, I joined McKinsey, even though I had done many years of studies in engineering. And I've been at McKinsey for 29 years, and I've loved my job. I still do. And quite frankly, my worlds have become, what I trained for and what I do as a living have gotten closer than when I started 30 years ago. And I'm at a good place. So I'm enjoying what I do, and the fact that it's even more rich in AI and data and analytics is all for the best.
That's an outstanding background, Eric, and we could spend an entire episode talking about your studies. But you also, as you mentioned, have spent your life both at McKinsey, working with organizations, and now there is that convergence of the importance of data with the digital transformation we're going through. Now, Eric, I've been involved in many organizations where we've gone through digital transformations, and in most instances, they started out with incredible hope and aspirations and goals, and they fizzled out. What do you see as the reason for those failures in digital transformations, and how should we approach it differently now?
Yes, you're right. They don't all turn out successes. Actually, when we survey companies all the time on this question. So the first thing that's interesting is everybody's got digital transformation of some sort going on. 90% tell us.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, 90%. And then we ask them, how successful were you with your revenue benefit or cost productivity benefit that you were hoping for? And in general, it's like 30% of what they were expecting, and so it's falling short of expectations. We all know that. This is not new news. The root causes behind are not multiple, but there are a few big ones, in my opinion. The very first one is the alignment of the top team on the prize. And so if we approach this as it's going to be a set of experiments versus we are really going after a big rock that's going to make a difference to our performance as a top team, then we tend to have a lot of fizzling out, because the day-to-day, hey, we got to deliver the quarter, takes over. And since that rock is not there to deliver the quarter, it's just little experiments, it's not surprising that the outcome so that's the number one and most important reason why they fail. The other one is an underinvestment in the capabilities for the journey. And so there's a bit of this belief that, hey, it's a transformation. We start now, in a couple of years, it'll be done. We can move on to something else. We'll get some consultants to help, some third parties, we'll do what we got to do, and then in 2 years, it's done. Versus, it's a journey. We're going to be doing this for the rest of our careers to actually inject more data and more analytics in everything we do, in marketing, in product development, in operations, in our contact center, in sales, in every aspect of our business will be infused with this. So we need a capability set. And so they're shortchanging the building out of that capability set. And so they find themselves that after the first year, all of a sudden they're running out of breath because they're running stuff in special project mode with a bunch of consultants, and it's like, okay, we don't have the machine to keep going, and so then it comes down. You know, air comes out of the balloon, and the whole thing comes down. And so there are other reasons, but let me just cap these two as being the primary ones.
These are reasons, and what I have seen in a lot of organizations, again, both that I've worked in and I've worked with, and I would like to touch on them a little bit before moving on. You said alignment at the top team level, which that lack of alignment is a lot of times a contributor to the failure of a lot of initiatives, including digital transformation. How can the leadership teams align better in your experience? Part of your experience has been working with these leadership teams. How should they approach it in order to be better aligned?
Yes. So to some extent, part of your question is, why is alignment so much more important for digital transformation than it may be for other kind of transformations? So, you know, let's just take a straight cost-cutting effort. Mahan, you got 5%, go get 5%. Eric, you've got 7%, go get 7%. You can come back, but like, you know, this is not for debate, just get it out. Everybody goes, there's their job. We don't need to align so much. The boss has decided, we go on and we do our thing. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but for effect. In a digital transformation, everybody's got a role to play. And so let's say that we decide we're going to transform how we do supply chain and how we do sales. And we start with these two areas, supply chain and sales. Okay. If I start to transform how I'm going to do supply chain, I'm probably going to impact how I order stuff. I'm probably going to impact how I manufacture stuff. I'm probably going to impact how I do ordering, how I do demand forecasting. And now all of a sudden I'm finding out, oh my God, this is actually touching the end-to-end process. And whatever little piece that I touch, I end up actually impacting somebody else. And then back to my point on capabilities, I'm going to need to hire new people. Oh, head of HR, you got to do something. I'm going to need to change my funding. I can no longer be doing project funding, as it's called. We're doing persistent funding, which is I'm standing up teams that are going to be persistent over time. Finance, we're going to need to change how we do funding. By the way, risk management, all of these teams that are not developing technology, they may infringe on data privacy, they may infringe on cybersecurity. How will the control functions do their job so we don't actually incur more risk? Every player has a game to play to actually capture the value. And so let me give an example. I was doing work for an airline once, and they had constructed, we participated with our help, phenomenal technology to actually be able to do extra loading of the cargo space on passenger airlines. Basically, you may not show up for your flight. That gives me more space to put in cargo. That is a yield optimization problem that you can solve with AI. And so we said, beautiful, this is working. We could see it on the analytics, we could see, and then we said, the planes are not flying with the cargo that we said they were supposed to sell and fly with. Why is that? Then we show up at Heathrow Airport. Guess what? The palletizing procedures were wrong. They weren't palletizing wrong. They weren't able to maximize the actual palletizing procedure. So it doesn't matter how much good I do on AI, the operational procedures are not where they need to be. If I don't align the head of operations to say, we're going to need to palletize with best practice, otherwise it doesn't matter what the AI does, then you don't get the value. Another example, and then I stop, in banking. If you and I start to do more banking online, that's beautiful. Okay, great. That means I don't show up in the branches anymore. I should be able to reduce branch staffing. I should perhaps even be able to close down branches and reap the productivity benefit from the fact that they go online. If the head of branches is not aligned with that, because the head of branches is probably saying, hey, my job is to sell. I need all the people to sell. I need to keep my branch open. Don't tell me about your app. It doesn't work with me. If you don't align them right at the top in saying, hey, I know we're going to change your incentives because as the volume comes down, in the branches, we got to be able to take people out. And so I'm not going to incentivize you on sales anymore. I'll incentivize you on a more total optimization. It won't work. So this is why AI digital, more than any other transformation, is the ultimate corporate team sport.
I love that, Eric. And by the way, thank you for the examples, because the audience really appreciates when there are examples and can visualize it. And as you were giving the examples, especially on the banking one, because I have some experience there, I could relate very well to it, having seen initiatives fail. One of the main points that I got from reading your book, which is definitely a guide. I love the graphics, I love the colors, I love the ability to reference to it, is that a lot of times organizations try to do digital, they initiate a digital strategy as opposed to being digital. And one of the lessons that I learned in reading the book and looking at the experience and the examples is there needs to be a rethinking of how to be digital, not to initiate a digital strategy. Oh, yes, we have one of those as well.
So great point. And it's almost, digital strategy is almost a dangerous word, because the strategy is not the digital or AI. These are things that will augment the effectiveness of our strategy. The strategy has to be about differentiation in your service or in your product or in your unit costs. And so it's coming in to actually accentuate your competitive differentiation. So it cannot be the strategy in and of itself. And that's why the starting point always has to be, what are you trying to do with your customers? What are you trying to do with your unit cost? And then at that point, you can say, okay, if that's what you're trying to do, then this is where you could imagine technology coming in and making a difference and accelerating where you're trying to get to and making it even more effective. So the starting point has to be clear strategically. Otherwise, it's the chase for the use case. Here's a use case. Here's another use case. You don't like that one? What about that one? I got 3 of those. Would you like those instead? And it becomes, let's just chase use cases, and we're forgetting, why are we doing all of this? There's a strategy here that we need to be supporting. That's what this stuff is supposed to be doing for us.
And actually, one of the things I'm seeing, Eric, is most specifically over the past few months in terms of some AI implementation or strategies, that's exactly the approach people are taking. Rather than thinking about what is the real use case, what is the customer impact that we want to have, they want to also have an AI initiative. So where in the organization can we implement AI?
Yes. And section 1 of the book, and there's a specific chapter, I think it's chapter 3, on getting the bite size right. So when you actually start, we recommend, don't focus so much on the plethora of use cases that you could be chasing. Take a step back and organize your company in whatever is logical. In a bank, it would be along customer journey. So the journey for onboarding, the journey for buying a credit card, the journey for getting servicing in the contact center. These are logical journeys, and figure out what's wrong with them today. Why are they not serving the customer the way they should? Why are they too expensive on a unit cost basis? And then overlay technology to go solve these business problems. So don't start with, I got a shiny toy, where can I use the toy? Start with the business problem to be solved and back into technology solutions. Some of these solutions may be AI, some of them may not be. They may just be good old simple analytics. They may not even be technology, Mahan. They could be just a simple process fix, or a fix to your risk management processes, or a fix to something else. So start with the business problem, put your business hat on, and say, I'm not just going to be chasing tech for tech's sake. I'm going to be chasing the most effective lever to solve my business problem. And you will find out that some of them are quite technology intensive and AI intensive, but not all of them will be. And I think that creates a more effective transformation roadmap at the end and gets you to more, more impact coming out of that. And so there is a danger. You are right in just chasing the, where can we shine the new toy, and that comes with a whole bunch of dangers.
And one of the challenges that I know you go into in the book as well, Eric, is the need to have and build the right leadership team. I go back to the Jim Collins analogy of having the right people on the bus. And in many instances, what I've seen is one person in the team at most is the tech person, CIO, or whoever else you want to call it. And the makeup of the leadership team doesn't enable it to do the kind of thinking that you are talking about. So how can organizations think about having the right leadership team with the skills needed to embark on this digital transformation?
So it is one of the most important aspects to eventually succeed. So any leadership team today, there are some exceptions, of course, but most leadership team today have a set of leaders that have grown with a pattern recognition for how to drive the business that is not necessarily aligned with AI and with digital. They're aligned with a set of levers that they have pulled in the past that were not technology levers. These levers are good levers, and they're going to continue to pull them. It can be levers around customer selection. It can be levers around how to optimize deployment of a sales force. It can be levers around, how to optimize a production environment. Those are all good levers. They're going to continue to pull, but the pattern recognition for how could technology do even more is not there. So how do you build that pattern recognition? Because you're not going to change your entire leadership team. You're going to keep them. So building that pattern recognition is what I call going slow to go fast. So going slow to go fast works like this. You take your top team, you level set their knowledge of technology. And I call it out in the book, we call it out in the book as being something around 6 to 10 hours of investments to at least have a common mental model. What is agile? What does a data engineer do? What is Gen AI? Is that the same as the old AI? Is that different? What is data architecture? What is it used for? And it's not that complicated. Okay, so 6 to 10 hours, you level set, step one. Step two, you go visit companies that have been ahead, that have done transformation on their own. How did they approach it? What did they do? And you start to align people on, okay, that's how it works at these other companies. This is how we can do it here as well. And step three, you align on where you're going to start. And so if I take back my analogies of journey, are we going to start in onboarding, or are we going to start in customer servicing or in credit card, to continue with my bank analogy? What you don't want to do is spread your investment too thin to please everybody, so everybody can get something. That's the wrong approach. Everybody gets something is the wrong approach, because you will fall back in shiny toys. So you said, no. We as a top team need to decide where strategically it's going to make the biggest difference. Well, guess what? It's onboarding. Great. We put all our eggs there in onboarding or in a couple of areas. And now we create the talent teams that are needed. We create the data environment that's needed to be successful. And it's not going to take a long time. It's not like a 5-year journey here in onboarding. It's going to be 12 months, 24 months. You're going to see material difference in the investment you're going to make. And when you're going to decide it's onboarding, you're going to do what we just talked about, which is It's not just tech levers. It can be something else. Be open to that. What's the problem? Back into that roadmap. And so those would be the three. Learn, level set on basic language, learn from others, and decide where you're going to focus.
I love that. And part of what I see is initially that level setting not happening, therefore the understanding of the potential applications, implications isn't there. And therefore it becomes a who gets the shiny toy. Okay, each one of you get a little shiny toy to play with. So that lack of initial understanding then contributes to what will end up resulting failure of the digital implementation and transformation.
Yes, exactly. And so a couple of questions maybe to test for if you're part of one of those management teams. Question number one that I love to toss in there. How is your digital transformation going? Watch who's answering the question. If it's the head of IT who answers the question, nothing wrong with the head of IT, but you know that there hasn't been enough empowerment of the business. The business is not owning this. So that would be a failure mode. Second question, is what you're working on going to make the performance in 2 or 3 or 4 quarters from now or not? And if the answer is not, then you know that no one in the C-suite is actually going to be rolling out of bed to drive that digital transformation because something else is more important. And question number 3, and that one usually goes to the CEO, which of the shiny toy story that you have currently ongoing, you're going to showcase at the investor meeting? And if it's none, then you know it's shiny toys. And if he says that one, or she says that one, then you go, okay, maybe there's something there that is really going to be material. So there's some of those, you'll have your own set of questions, but I like to toss those in to just reflect. I mean, basically play the mirror back. For us, the top team, we need to be working on big things that we're aligned on, and things that are going to be material to our performance in a year from now.
Those are great questions to ask ourselves. As you said, also to level set ourselves on whether these are real priorities or shiny toys we're playing with. So you mentioned the business case, which is essential, the leadership team alignment. And then another thing that you mentioned in the book is the fact that the core of every digital transformation is people transformation. And that's a big challenge that I've seen. Even when leadership teams are aligned around the business case, which is a lot of times not the case, they bringing the people along fails. So what are some of your thoughts with respect to what it takes to make it a people transformation along with the digital transformation?
Yes. So there's a reason why it is section 2 in the book on talent. Because after section 1, which is where's the value and are we aligned where we're going to go after, the very first thing is not tech, it's not data, it's people. And that's because when you got that next piece right, things tend to go well. It's easier to get that piece right when you have all aligned on where's the value and how we're going to capture it, because from there comes a pretty natural roadmap of what kind of talent we're going to need to actually be able to realize this opportunity. And so now talent is no longer in a theoretical vacuum. It's actually anchored on a specific opportunity that you're going to go after. If you're just starting the journey, the talent equation is going to be by the dozens, not hundreds, not thousands. And so by the dozens, it becomes a feasible problem to address. And HR is going to be at the table, and HR will need to change their approach. Recruiting digital talent, you got to be faster. You got to demonstrate that you are really committed to technology. You got to be asking the right questions to get the right talent in. So there is a bit of a retooling of how HR manages that talent pool. But then so HR is at the table. You know what you need by a few dozens, and then you get that machine going. And after a few months, you may get a little bit of third-party help to start with, but the point is that you want to have these people as part of your team over time. And so we say something in the book that has been quite important, at least in my approach to this, is you cannot outsource your way to digital excellence. You need to own that bench. And so while you may get a little bit of help, at some point you need to have those people in-house, and we can go into why that's kind of fundamental. You build that bench, you will be able to build a dozen, a few dozens, 100, a couple hundred, and then becomes a very important turning point, which is okay. I've been able to reskill selectively. I've been able to hire on the outside, but now I need to move in the hundreds. I need to move in the maybe even thousands if you're a large company. Where am I going to get those folks? And now you need to look at your IT and tech organization. And that organization now needs to be modernized. The skill set that you had in there, which was appropriate for perhaps an IT environment of 10 years ago, also needs to progress. And that becomes the next bigger surgery, which is how do I transform my IT organization to start to supply the additional talent pool that I need, because I need data, AI, and analytics everywhere in the company.
Now, Eric, in doing that, one of the challenges I've seen is a lot of times the immune system of the organization goes to work and the antibodies try to reject the new entrants, in part because HR has had to make modifications, whether it is to compensation or flexibility practices, in part because this is where the investment is going. So these are the golden girls and the golden boys who are coming in. So the antibody goes to work, getting in the way of this new these new entrants into the organization. What has been your experience, and what are best practices in approaching it so it becomes something that everyone is vested in making succeed, rather than people making sure this doesn't succeed so they continue the way things were in the past?
Yes. At the most senior level of your tech talent organization, you need, as a CEO and as a CFO and as a CHRO, you need to be protective of that talent that you're bringing in. You need to give them time to absorb the context of the company they're working in. They're coming in with great digital talent, but they don't have the context. They don't know the problems to be solved. They may not understand your industry. They may not understand your customers. They may not understand your products. And so that requires a certain customization on theirs. I mean, they need to understand that, and that takes a little bit of time. You also need to give them a chance to show you a little bit what their magic is about. And so put them to use, put them on a problem, and be willing to learn on your side. What is it that they're bringing new to the organization? So protecting for a little bit of time. That doesn't mean everybody's perfect. That comes from the outside. So of course you'll apply judgment, but giving them, sometimes there's that reaction from the organization tends to be quick. We don't like this. We don't like this. And then you see the whole organ rejection at work. So the leadership team needs to offer a little bit that protection for some time. Point number one. And point number two, you have to be building careers for the technologists that are going to be attractive. Attractive from a compensation standpoint, attractive at the kind of problems and attractive from the standing they have in the organization. And that takes us to creating that technology career path where I can continue to grow in my roles and in my compensation and in my stature in the company on the basis of the excellence of my craft, not on the basis of how many people report to me. And so it's the difference between a technical career and a managerial career. And if you don't build a technical career in the organization, and HR has work to do to build that, then people will go. I mean, that's kind of a foundational aspects. Any good technologist will expect to be rewarded on the back of excellency in their craft. And so those will be the two things, Mohan. I mean, kind of establishing that protection for the first few years, protection, at least giving them a chance, and having career tracks that keeps them motivated and sends them the signal that you value craftsmanship in technology.
Which is why it's the holistic approach that you also address. This is being digital. It's incorporating it as this is fully part of the organization. It's not just an initiative.
Correct. It becomes business as usual. And so the way we do strategy every year, there's not a digital strategy that runs on the side. There's a strategy that runs, and we are embedding technology. Okay, so that's how it's same old way we used to do strategy, but now we're embedding technology levers in it. How we do career tracks, well, now we need to accommodate for that. It's not a special project. That's how we actually handle technologists in our company, so on and so forth. And that's eventually that's how the culture changes. But it cannot be special project mode all the time. It may start in a special project mode for 6 months, for 12 months, but you have to know that at some point it needs to become business as usual. And it doesn't stop. We're going to be doing this for the rest of our careers. Not it will stop after we're done with special project mode. That gets forgotten. And it takes us also to the operating model of all this. Like how we know how it's going to run in special project. How is it going to run in business as usual? That's a bit the section 3 in this book, which is how do we actually start to organize business, technologists, operations into a mode where everybody now can be productive using technology to help our customers and help our productivity.
Yeah, so it actually impacts that organizational structure
Yes,
that needs to be set up for the digital transformation as well.
it does. Absolutely. With a view that that structure will evolve. It may start a little bit as a special project at first. This big organization here, kind of that special project, digital stuff is starting, but soon there's got to be a view that no, the goal here is to embed every aspect of our business with digital, with AI, with data, and business leaders need to actually be pulling versus let me call IT. It's no longer let me call IT to get some technology stuff done. It's I have teams that know how to develop this stuff that report to me, head of supply chain, or report to me, head of sales. And I can guide them in developing solutions that are going to make me better at selling, or make me better at actually meeting my supply chain needs. And that is not so straightforward to do, because now I have a responsibility for guiding the development of technology. I'm not going to write code, but I'm the one who's saying these are the problems to solve. And I have learned enough that I know the kind of team that can solve a problem like this. And I kind of know the goals that I'm going to put for that team for the next 3 months, and the 3 months after, and 3 months after. So every manager is becoming a little bit of a product manager. They're able to guide a product that management effort. And that's when you are rewired. When your business leaders across your different functions and businesses know the kind of problems to be solved, how they're going to get solved, and guide that development effort. When you have achieved that state, you're rewired.
And for that rewiring, Eric, I was laughing because it requires giving up certain turf issues that exist in organizations and certain territorial issues. So it's really rethinking. And I go back to your point about the transformation and the people is an essential part of it. This requires a different thinking all throughout.
It does. And it does call on a higher level of collaboration than in maybe the organizational construct that we have been used to in the past. In the past, if I can make things simple, that's my P&L, those are my resources, those are my objectives, this is what I'm going to deliver. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that because the accountability model in this is so strong. But in digital and AI, because you have that end-to-end effect that we spoke about earlier, which is I may do digital here, but guess what? I have to reduce headcount in the branches there. That alignment requires a higher level of collaboration than is typically noted. So that's an important trait that people recruit for, the collaborativeness of folks and the ability to say, I'm working to optimize a greater good, you know what, my incentives may not be 100% aligned, but I know what the greater good is. So I'm going to go do what's right for the company. So collaboration is a very, very important aspect of this. And the second one is everybody now has a role to play in technology, as we spoke about earlier. So what it means now is I have to view my role as I'm finding the problems to be solved, and I'm actually willing to fund and guide development teams. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. As a head of sales, you know what? I would like 3 agile pods to come and work in my unit to develop technology to do this. I know the problems to put them on. I will guide them and I will fund them. I will fund them to actually achieve a better sales performance. And so now it's no longer, it's freebies. Let's call in IT. It's free until it's not anymore. No, actually the businesses, the functions, the leaders, this is where their accountability comes in. You want to do digital and AI, great, you pay for it. And so now they're your pods. And of course, they work within a construct that makes sense, and we avoid duplication and all of that. We can get into this. But at the end of the day, I believe that this is where I should be deploying that lever. This is the return I think I'm going to get, and that's the investment I'm willing to put in. When that flywheel starts to work, which is people, different business leaders, have that accountability for the performance of digital and AI, then the flywheel becomes a lot easier to turn. It's no longer a push. You're in a pull. They're pulling for it, and you've set in the right conditions. But it has to start with problem to solve. How much is it worth solving that problem? What investment am I willing to put in? What resources will I need? Who's going to be accountable for that? How do we realign the people end to end? It's heavy work that we skip at the beginning because we're in so much of a rush to go do the shiny toy and to show an app, because we think success is to show the app as quickly as possible. This is what the app can do. Okay, how much money have we made? That's the final metric. Or how much happier is the customer versus 3 months ago? That's the final metric. And those metrics don't move because you say AI. They move because people have been taught. And frankly, that's always been true in business. Like a good plan, a good problem, a good plan, good resourcing, a good business case. That still is true with AI and digital.
And that's what, at least in my experience, is the contributor to some of those failed digital transformation initiatives of the past. In many instances, the end result has been the app or the product or whatever it is, the shiny toy, rather than the digital transformation. Now, I imagine, as what we're experiencing, Eric, all organizations need to go through this digital transformation. But do you see certain industries, sectors, types of organizations where this is even a bigger urgency for them to consider going through the process?
Yes, we run this survey instrument called Digital Quotient at McKinsey. It's basically something like 60 questions that get asked to measure maturity level in digital. And we've been running this now for 7-8 years, so we have a decent data set. We can clearly see industries. Okay, I mean, you can see, public sector is still in a very, very early stage of that. You can see banks, much more advanced. But what's interesting is within a given industry, take consumer packaged goods, you take banking, you will find a very wide spread. And so, yes, on average, industries position themselves on a maturity curve, but within an industry, we see very wide spreads. And so the question is, does it matter if I'm late? If I'm a laggard? Does it really matter at the end of the day? Because frankly, I mean, 10 years ago, we used to hear, I want to invest last in technology because it's proven and it's cheaper. So maybe that's still true today. So here's what we did. Here's what's interesting. This is going to come out, I think, next week in Harvard Business Review. We took banking. Banking has been at this for 10 years. And so we have a pretty decent data set by now. And it happens that we benchmark 80 banks around the world. on very, very detailed granular benchmarking. So how many people are using the app? How much of their sales is online? How many people they have in their contact center? How many branches do they have? How many people in the branches do they have? 50 parameters like this. They give it to us every year on a very normalized benchmark. And then we know their financial performance, of course. And so we have that for the last 5 years, every year. We take that group of 80, we split them. 20 top quartile digital, 20 bottom quartile digital. So, digital being adoption of the app, how many of their sales are online. And so now we track these two groups over time, over 5 years. Well, guess what? The digital leaders in that group, those that have higher level of adoption of the app by their customers, but also much higher sales online, lower people in their contact centers because they've been better at call deflection, lower number of people in their branches because they've had that integrated problem that we talked about earlier. Well, guess what? Total return to shareholders, growth, productivity, number of new customers. The metrics are all very, very differentiated for the leaders, not marginal, substantially different. Here's what I'm concluding from this. Oh, one more interesting fact, Mahan. If you take the leaders over these 5 years, none of them become laggards. Sometimes they fall in the middle, they don't become laggards. And if you look at the laggers, none of them become leaders in that 5-year journey. They improve, they can be in the middle, but they don't change position. It's persistent. I think the game is starting to be played in retail banking. If you are sitting in the laggard category and you are not making massive, massive changes now to get yourself out of that box, the game will be played out. That's not true in all industries. Some are way back. The game is not played out, but in the industries where the game has been played for a decade already, it is starting to be played out. Why? Because rewired capabilities are hard to build, but they're also hard to copy. And so everything we've been talking about, leadership that leads, new talent, we haven't even spoken about data and all of these other things, but all of these capabilities are hard to build. But once you have them, every day, everywhere, in all aspects of your businesses, you have a little bit better, little bit better, little bit better. You don't see it in a month. You may not see it in a quarter, but over 5 years, you see it. And that's what we saw in banking, and that performance trajectory is just total return to shareholders, almost twice as good for the leaders than the laggers. And so, yes, if you lead, you get rewarded. And if you lead, it's actually starting to create some distance, and it's hard to catch up that distance.
That's outstanding data, Eric. And it goes to the point of the flywheel effect in this digital transformation as well, where those small contributors over months and years at the beginning in an industry, people might not see that much of a difference, but that flywheel takes place. And then it's almost impossible to catch up for the other organizations.
That's exactly right. That's where I'm at as well when I look at the data, which is the flywheel momentum is starting to take a hold. It takes a little bit of time to turn. It's not overnight. It's not, oh, we're going to do this for a year and then, we're going to be good. No, it takes time to build. But when it's building, it's really hard to replicate and catch up with.
Well, the good news is the framework for the flywheel is right here in the book, Rewired. You've done an outstanding job with your co-authors, both documenting the entire process, great visuals, great data, supporting on how leaders can approach this. Before finding out more on how the audience can connect with you and find out about the book, would love to know, Eric, you work with CEOs and leadership teams. In addition to your book and work with McKinsey, are there certain resources or practices you recommend to them to take on in order for them to become more capable at leading this digital transformation?
Yes. So there's certainly a few that I would recommend. So one is this notion of visiting others and learning from others, I think is very important. And so I don't know exactly what's the right frequency, but getting on a plane and going and spending. I did that with a client recently. The CEO took the entire team and went to Seattle for 3 days and visited some big tech and visited some startup and visited some companies that have been down the journey for some time, even if it's not in their industry, preferably if it's not in their industry, and listen to their stories and take stock and talk as a management team, at dinner in the evening, and start to immerse yourself into this. These are all these executives are smart people. If you actually start to build their pattern recognition, they have the context for their company. They know the problems to be solved. They will be able to start to project back. That is probably the most important investment to make as a management team. And so get your top team exposed to what others are doing, and then decide what you're going to do. So that's where I would, and of course, buy the book and read the book.
Yeah, outstanding. And as you mentioned that, I talked to the CMO of Chick-fil-A from early on until a few years back, and when he retired. And one of the first things that they did was to go to benchmark BMW, benchmark Amazon, organizations like that for their operations at Chick-fil-A. So part of what you're saying is that it's not necessarily a bank going to another bank. There are a whole host of issues with respect to that. You can learn from the best in other industries.
Exactly. And a lot of what we're talking about in this book is industry agnostic. How you recruit a data engineer and build a career for a data engineer, that is true in tech as it is in banking, as it is in consumer packaged goods. It's the same thing. How you prioritize the domains and where you're going to go, that approach is the same. Of course, the domains are different. The journeys are different, but the approach is the same. And so visiting other companies, especially in other industries, I think is particularly good. And it's interesting if you read some of the last cases. The one I was inspired with, I got inspired by all three that are there, but the one on DBS Bank, and the case that's written up, I think it's chapter 33 or 34, I forget. Takes you on a 10-year journey that DBS has been on. At the very beginning of their journey, they go and they decide they're going to visit big tech. And so they visit the Google and the Netflix and the LinkedIn and the Apples and the Amazons, and then they get back home and they said, we got to be a lot more like a tech company, because that's the banking of the future. And so they have this label, this new motto, I guess, that they have. They said Gandalf become their new rallying cry, because Gandalf is Google and Apple and Netflix, except for the D. The D is DBS, and they want to be like a tech company, and Gandalf is going to be the new approach. And they got totally inspired by how software gets developed. And people will get inspired by other stories, but for them, it was the stories of the tech companies. Some companies don't like that. They prefer to be inspired by, different peers. But in any case, the fundamental of visiting and opening up your eyes and learning a new language and a new way of seeing things, that's a small investment. It's not a big investment. And frankly, you can always say at the end of it, that's not for us. At least you will have given it a fair shot.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I would urge people not to say it's not for us, because the smartest ideas jump industries. They are for you. Find ways that they are for you. Now, Eric, how can the audience find out more about your book and follow your work?
So the book is out. Last week it came out on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and it can be found in bookstores, of course, and purchased online. We publish a huge amount at McKinsey. So on McKinsey.com, you take any of the topic of interest. For example, you take Gen AI. You want to find out more about Gen AI, like many others. We've published a huge amount. I think there's a richness on McKinsey.com. That's another source, of course, that you can go to. And then at some point, if anybody was to say, hey, you know what, we'd like to engage a bit more with a professional that's been down this path, I'm here for you. The two co-authors are here for you as well. And of course, we'll make ourselves available. But there's a lot out there to consult. And hopefully what I'm hoping the book will do is have in one place, in one coherent framework, with one coherent language, with a holistic approach, the whole story told, versus I need to read 200 different articles, and then after that I'm still confused because everybody's been using a different language, a different framework. So it should be a good foundational aspect, hopefully.
It really is. And you do a beautiful job in the book, as I mentioned, taking everyone through the entire journey and entire cycle. While I'll find myself referring back to it, I think it's a comprehensive look at what it takes to lead the organization through this digital transformation. And we were chatting before we started recording the conversation. I do encourage, and obviously podcast listeners are people who like learning. I do encourage all of the listeners and the CEOs that I interact and work with. It is essential. We are living through the speed of the exponential curve of many of these technologies that will transform how we live in our organizations. And it is our responsibility and opportunity as leaders to lead our organizations forward. So this book, I think, does an outstanding job with respect to that. I wanted to wrap up actually at the beginning and on the cover of your book, because I loved the wording on the inside cover jacket, and I wanted to read that, which is how companies navigate the technology world to achieve competitive advantage is the defining business challenge of our time. It's not a simple journey. As one CEO said, we can find digital everywhere in our company, but the bottom line, for digital and AI to deliver on its potential, executives need to be ready and willing to undertake the organizational surgery required to become a digitally capable enterprise. Thank you so much, Eric Lamarre, for the guidebook in helping leaders take on this surgery and leading their organizations to the digital transformation of the future. Thank you so much for the conversation, Eric.
Mahan, it's been fantastic to be with you during this hour, and thank you for the time.